Hello, everyone. Professor Arneline M. Torres here for the continuation of our discussion in international tourism and culture. For this presentation, I'm going to talk about the evolution of travel and tourism 1. Now, to give you a glimpse of the next presentation, we have it titled Evolution of Travel and Tourism. This presentation is divided into two parts. First part covers Roman Empire period that starts from 27 BC or before Christ up to 476 AD. AD means Anno Domini. It's a Latin word that means during the time of Christ. Next is the Middle Ages that covers 500 to 1480, followed by 16th century, then the 17th century, and the last is the Industrial Revolution. For the second part, we will cover the 19th and the 20th century. So, let's start looking at what are the important events that happened during the Roman Empire period. During the Roman Empire period, as I've said, it covers from 27 BC to 476 AD. Travel developed for military and trade. When we say military, as we all know, during those times, countries usually fight among each other to conquer territories. And so we have battalions of soldiers that are usually fighting to defend for their own country or maybe to conquer another's territory. Likewise, during that time, trade do happen. As you can see on the picture on your right, we have a big ship here that contains goods, and there are traders or people who are engaged in selling or trading maybe goods from their country to another territory. Also, during this time, uh, people travel for political reasons. Political reasons might be developing some alliances with other countries, as I have previously said, when people are sent for a military reason. And also, people travel for disseminating messages or for the communication of messages from the central government to its distant territories. Moving on, I'd like to show you a picture of a social structure of empires displayed in hierarchies. As I've said, during those times, travel is limited to people to do their activities. Now, I would like to show you the social structure during the Roman period wherein in this social structure represented by a triangle because of course the bottom part of the triangle represents the majority of people. So a lot of people during that time are working as slaves. When we say slaves, they are usually bought by the master, and they can only travel if their master would be moving or traveling to another place, and if their master would be bringing them to that certain place. Next level of the hierarchy are the farmers. The farmers are those who are engaged in planting and maybe taking care of animals. Followed by the artisans. The artisans are people who has capabilities of working on something or building something or creating something. Like for example, the creation of statue or maybe being part of building a palace or maybe painting or drawing. Then fourth on the hierarchy are the merchants. Merchants are considered a little higher compared to the um, three jobs like the slaves, the farmers, and the artisans because they do no business. They are engaged in the economic activity of the place, and so they are free to travel from one place to another, like what you have seen previously. Okay, and then followed by the scribes. The scribes are considered the literate during those times. Literate in a sense that scribes are people who transcribe, who usually take down notes on meetings, or maybe when they're crafting like a law. Okay, and this is actually followed by the soldiers, who are then considered people of authority. Soldiers are known to put order in the country. That's why they're considered high in the hierarchical structure of the empire, followed by the government officials, who are usually right hand and left hand of the pharaoh, who manages the country or the territory. And then the pharaoh is actually the one who is the head of this pyramid, and the one who runs the whole place like a country. Okay, I am showing you this social structure for you to see how people, or why do people travel. They do travel during those times because not for tourism, but they do travel basically because of their work. Okay, so let's continue. uh, that time, travel was also necessary for artisan and architects. As I've said, artisans are people who are good in doing crafts, like maybe during those times, like you know, sculpture, or maybe the building of these pillars. Okay, and architects are the ones who design like palaces and tombs. They are imported, meaning to say from one place they're brought to another place to design and construct palaces and tombs. Okay, so in ancient Greece, people traveled to witness the Olympic Games. We all know that the Olympic Games is still going on at this present time, and it all started in Greece. And during that time, both the participants and the spectators require accommodations and food services. The Olympic Games would usually last for a couple of days, and because people would want to see the whole event, they would usually need a place to sleep and a place to eat. Okay, and wealthy Romans in the ancient times traveled to seaside resorts in Greece and Egypt for sightseeing purposes. I think this is only the concept of tourism during that time when the wealthy Romans would leisurely travel to Greece, to Egypt, to see sites. The previous pictures that I've shown you are people travel in relation to their work. Okay, so let's move on to the Middle Ages. The Middle Age period is a period from 500 AD to 1400 AD. So during the Middle Age, there was a growth of travel for religious reasons, not working, but for religious reasons. So it has become an organized phenomenon for pilgrims to visit their Holy Land. Holy Land means the place that they consider holy, or the place of their God, such as Muslims. Okay, for Muslims, it has to be Mecca. This is the picture that represents a place in Mecca inside their mosque. And Christians in pilgrimage like this would usually go to Jerusalem and Rome. So these are just some notable events during the Middle Age period. What is highlighted in the Middle Age period is actually the travel for religious reason. Let's move on to the 16th century. Sorry, this one is a picture of the pilgrimage. So this one is in front of the Vatican, and people would usually witness the parade of the Pope and the cardinals, which is a very important event for Catholics. Okay, moving on to the 16th century. In the 16th century, the growth of in England's trade and commerce led to the rise of a new type of tourist. So these are the kind of tourists that travel to broaden their own experience and knowledge. So how do they do that? They broaden their experience by meeting some people during social activities, like for example, this one, John Dee performing an experiment before Queen Elizabeth I. So this can be a source of knowledge, and for some people who have seen this the first time, it's kind of fall as an experience. Okay, so as I've said, experience would mean dancing or probably partying. That's the type of partying that they have during the early times. So it's a ball, it's a dance at the court of King Henry. Okay, so moving forward to 17th century. In the 17th century, the sons and daughters of the British aristocracy traveled throughout Europe. When we say British aristocracy, these are the people who are rich, who are aristocrats. And when we say Europe, countries that they usually visit are Italy, Germany, and France. And their visit is for a period of time, like 2 or 3 years, to improve their knowledge. So, just like what students are now doing, they go to places for more than a year. It's not tourism because it's more than a year, but the idea is the travel is for the improvement of their knowledge. So the improvement of knowledge, such as internship, such as studying in another country, did not happen only in the recent time. Even during the 17th century, it do happen already. So that time, it's known as a grand tour. Okay, remember the word grand tour. So grand tour is a necessary part of the training of the future administrators and political leaders. So if you will look at the picture on your right, you will see that they're well dressed because these are the aristocrats, these are the rich people of their time. Okay? Now, the last part of this presentation is the Industrial Revolution period. So during the Industrial Revolution period, from about 1750 to 1850, in Europe, it created the base for mass tourism. When we say mass tourism, because people are, having more means of living then. So aside from their basic daily life expenses, they still have some extra money to spend, and they do spend that for travel. So, mass tourism is actually a kind of tourism wherein it carries a big number of people, like maybe 50s or even hundreds, to a certain destination. This period turned most people away from basic agriculture into the town, factory, and urban way of life. From the title itself, Industrial Revolution, it means that from the farm, they're moving on to the cities, or from the countryside, they're moving on to the cities to do work in factories. Okay? And during that time, it's the urban way of life. So, because of the improve of economy, as a result, there was a rapid growth of the wealth and the education level of the middle class, as well as an increase of leisure time and a demand for holiday and tourism activities. So, if you've heard of Thomas Cook, that's when Thomas Cook started. That's the first travel agency that that actually have organized mass tourism. So again, I'd like to summarize the content of part one, wherein we started during the Roman Empire period that highlights the travel for military, for trade, and for political reasons, as well as for communication of messages from the central government to its distant territories. Travel during that time was also necessary for the artisans and architects that are imported to design and construct palaces and tombs. And I also have said that in ancient Greece, people traveled to Olympic Games. So during their travel to the Olympic Games, the participants and spectators required accommodations and food services. Also, let's count that the wealthy Romans during those time traveled to seaside resorts in Greece and Egypt for sightseeing purpose. Second, the Middle Age period that starts from 500 to 1400 AD, where the growth of travel for religious reasons was very visible. So it had become an organized phenomenon for pilgrims to visit their holy land. I have given Mecca as an example, in Jerusalem as well as Rome. And I said during the 16th century, the growth in England's trade and commerce led to the rise of a new type of tourist. Those traveled to broaden their own experience and knowledge. In the 17th century, that continued because the sons and daughters of British aristocracy traveled throughout Europe, usually 2 or 3 years, to improve their knowledge. And as I've said, it's known as the Grand Tour, which became a necessary part of training of future administrators and political leaders. And the last period that we covered for this first part is the Industrial Revolution, which we highlighted in Europe, that created the base for mass tourism. So this period turned most people away from basic agriculture into town or factory and urban way of life. And because life has improved, as a result, there was a rapid growth of the wealth and education level of the middle class, as well as an increase of leisure time and a demand for holiday tourism activities. So that's it, and I'll see you on the next part. Okay, I have said goodbye, but please welcome me back to give you more details about the Industrial Revolution period. Let me just show you at first the different. These are photos taken in two factories during the Industrial Revolution period. So you can see here, this is a company that manufactures thread, and people, I assume, who are working from the farm migrated to the city to be part of this industrial revolution. So you can also see, obviously, that there are more men working than women during those times. And especially on the right photo here, we see that this is a line of machines that are used for an assembly of automobile. And in here, it's very obvious that during those times, uh, the men are the majority in the manufacturing companies. I am highlighting the men during that time because I would like to see you, or I would like to show you the change that happened in the 19th century uh, in the industry as far as the gender issue of working is concerned. And may I add also that during the Industrial Revolution period, travel for health became important. Travel for health would mean people would go to spa towns, like the rich and the fashionable Europeans began visiting the spa towns. When we say spa towns, these are bath houses. So when we say bath houses, these are the jimjilbang of the old times. People would normally go to places to bathe, like in England or in Baden in Germany. They also go to seaside resorts for them to bathe and at the same time enjoy fresh air. And there are places that has been mentioned that are frequently visited by the rich people. And these are Scarborough, Margate, and Brighton. So I'd like to highlight that during the Industrial Revolution period, it's not only the migration from the farm to the urban centers that is a phenomenon that happened during that time, but also people's eyes opened that they can do travel for health reasons and especially to go bathing into the public baths or seaside resort. So that's it. That's still part of evolution of travel and tourism part 1. I'll see you on the next presentation, which is the evolution of travel and tourism part 2, covering 19th and 20th century.